We have more for your ears only. I'm Catherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Share the burden. That's Israel government policy calling for the ultra-Orthodox minority to become more fully integrated into civil life and responsibilities. Foremost among the nation's challenges last week was increased violence from the civil war spilling across its border with Syria and from a growing threat across its border with Lebanon, whose Hezbollah Muslim militia has taken the side of Syria's Assad regime, increasing Shiite-Sunni division and violence throughout the region. Now this.
It's very important that as two of the largest economies in the world that we work to establish clear rules of the road internationally for trade and investment, which can increase prosperity and global growth.
China and the United States have recently been working on issues regarding the Korean Peninsula through close cooperation.
In advance of this weekend's unusually informal U.S.-China summit at the Sunnylands estate in California, President Obama stressed economic issues, while China's Assistant Foreign Minister Zhang Zheguan noted common concerns over nuclear-armed and perennially provocative North Korea. In the event, cybersecurity, high-tech surveillance, and the inevitable threat to civil liberties and human rights took a higher place, at least in minds of Americans, still shaken by leaks about massive communications monitoring in the Obama administration.
To consider the goals and likely results of the Sunnylands Summit, we're joined again by Dr. Elizabeth Economy, Senior Fellow and Director for Asia Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks very much.
Some experts read signs of greater flexibility in the new Chinese leader's willingness to forego the usual dignity that comes with a formal state visit, something like the way the new pope has refrained from much traditional pomp and ceremony. How important do you see the informal nature of this summit?
I think actually it is important because I think that it removes the summit from sort of the very political and politicized nature of Washington, D.C., puts it in a far more relaxed setting, moves the two leaders from, suits to shirt sleeves, I think, and affords them a greater opportunity to have a kind of off-the-cuff, more personal, wide-ranging discussion than if it were a much more scripted kind of summit. So I think that it is an important move to move this out of Washington and out to Sunnylands.
How important are personal relations between leaders versus the national interests they must advance and protect? Are they more important when one of those leaders is not bound by the restraints of popular democracy, not to mention a hostile Congress?
Well, I think, in fact, that personal relations matter no matter what type of regime the leaders might be governing. I think that it, again, affords them a certain opportunity to do back-channel diplomacy, to pick up the phone, to call each other when one might be experiencing some difficulties, to, ask the other to sort of, do a favor perhaps at some point in time, or to push on a certain issue if need be. I think it would be a mistake to think that President Xi is not bound in any way by sort of popular perceptions, by popular movements. I think one of the things we've seen in China over the past decade or so has been a very dramatic rise, both in sort of popular protest via the Internet and expressions of viewpoints on foreign policy and on a range of broad domestic issues, and obviously popular protest in the street. So I think although he governs in an authoritarian state, the Chinese people definitely make their voice heard.
Some say that disclosures of U.S. surveillance of domestic phone calls and closer reading of overseas Internet traffic will undermine any complaints by Obama about Chinese hacking of American defense and business secrets. What's your view on that?
Well, I think we've already seen from the early comments emanating from President Xi and Obama's meeting that, it was one of the first questions that was raised by a reporter. I think President Obama, tried to point out that there are obvious differences between what the United States has been doing and the reasons behind it, and other types of cyber attacks, sort of industrial espionage and military hacking that obviously the Chinese are undertaking. So I think he's, tried to sort of differentiate between the two, but I think there's no doubt that it strengthens the Chinese hand. It makes it more difficult for President Obama to press his case, but I think everybody knows that there are clear differences between the two types of sort of monitoring and hacking.
Is it also possible there might be some reverse effect, that digital surveillance under Obama will win greater respect from Xi given the tough measures China takes for security and stability as sort of we tough guy leaders?
I I would think probably not. My guess is that President Xi understands this largely as a point of leverage in his negotiations with President Obama, because really it undermines sort of the differences between the two states, which is really what the United States relies on in many cases to press to its advantage, the fact that we are, a great liberal, open democracy, rule-abiding, accountable system. And so to the extent that we're not, and we move closer to China, I think that just strengthens Xi's hand.
Well, then that brings up the question about two of the recent promotions that Obama made. Susan Rice as National Security Advisor, Susan Power as UN Ambassador, both human rights sympathizers. Does that suggest that the president will place more emphasis on this issue, as many of his supporters are demanding, sooner or later? Or could it be something of a substitute, or at least a delaying action, as that pair has to settle in before having much effect on actual policy?
Well, I think neither one of them is going to be, in some respects, directly managing human rights policy, although certainly Susan Rice will have sort of overarching responsibilities in terms of helping to structure the U.S.-China relationship. I think she was known as a tough negotiator in the United Nations by the Chinese, so undoubtedly they're not terribly pleased by her appointment. But I think that human rights has certainly fallen down on the agenda of the United States, sort of as a singularly important issue over the past 4 years, well, over the past 8 years. We have so many issues now with which we need to deal with China that human rights has just become one of many, as opposed to when it used to be sort of human rights trade in Taiwan. Now we have cyber hacking, we have climate change, we have, North Korea. We have a whole host of issues where we want to try to find common ground, and I think human rights has definitely taken a back seat. I don't really see that changing that much with the appointment of these two new people.
Do you think it's just a coincidence that North Korea last week initiated the first dialogue in years with South Korea, or does Pyongyang sense that Beijing is beginning to share more of Washington's concern about the North's provocative nuclear and missile testing and threats?
Oh, I think absolutely there is a direct link between the recent meeting that Xi Jinping had with North Koreans and what we're seeing now transpire in terms of sort of new diplomacy on the part of North Korea towards South Korea and re-engaging. I think there's no doubt in my mind that the Chinese delivered a very stern message to the North Koreans. They have really, I think at this point in time, the debate has broken open wide within China over China's policy toward North Korea, with many Chinese analysts and foreign policy officials arguing that North Korea is a millstone around China's neck, that they get very little advantage from being closely allied with North Korea. So I think that the North Koreans are sensing a pretty dramatic shift in the overall orientation of China toward North Korea, and realize that they're going to have to start taking their own actions to improve the situation, because the Chinese are not going to be there to support them.
Dr. Elizabeth Economy is a senior fellow and director for Asia Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York.
Quote from the news, "You want our park? Come get it from us." That was Turkish demonstrator Özgür Keskinen protecting Istanbul's last green space during days of protest and police pushback in Taksim Square after Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan vowed to continue the redevelopment there that has come to symbolize his often harsh authoritarian way.
Next, the threat and promise of 3D printing beyond plastic guns, for your ears only.